The advantages trade border shortfalls necessitate investment surveillance laws and streamlined trade court via base 23. Border initiatives require significant tax CB begins to expedite clearance by 50%. However, reports of entry see exponential increase in connected trade. Reports of post transition for current stopping points, innovative processes, more proliferate land port slower adoption, automation, awareness, reduce efficiency, IoT sensor, and reduce the cost optimization generated to minimize weight, increase screening and security capabilities, not inspection, detect patterns, anticipate threats, and program resources. Empirics for repeaters 23. Exams done in 8 minutes compared to 120. Tech contributed $1 billion to saving border security, streamlines trade by resolving the labor deficit. CHS 7-9 border security deter massive legal immigration, enabling efficient use of resources, automating previously intensive tax free, and is critical facility trade. The app is key to fast growth strategies. At all 23, traffic increase obstacles for competitiveness, efficient border generate simply benefits commerce and pulling labor outcome, accomplishing adoption and use of critical economic integration, reliable supply chains are essential for growth, increasingly complicated global conflict with trade disputes, irregular migration, and global supply chain shocks. The borders more important than ever. The 10-minute reduction of wait times resulted in 26 million additional car monthly, also 5.4 million additional families, and Mexican nearshoring plans are ambitious, but actions needed to lock and gauge down 24 companies which to announce plans to act on their destination face similar challenges, business friendly, sign up to top political capital, private capital willingness, Mexico ensure companies it's reliable nearshoring boom will die. Surveillance is key to nearshoring and global competitiveness. Ever Soul 24 a supply chain shift from China to north, the Mexican military expansion, the border secure manufacturing center for capital border militarization, key to economic competitiveness of borderlands as a manufacturing center while advancing control of research region politically important to U.S. entries initially a few solve problems in the border, preferring the political security are offered by authoritarian regimes, intensifying border militarization towards resolve problems manufacturing began to consider border cities as an attractive alternative to surveillance cities where key Mexican nearshoring is the key to U.S. supply chain release. Remember, at all 24 industry for reshoring globalization by regionalization, strengthening value supply value chain Mexican standard. The benefit strategically located to the U.S. allows company to reduce transport times and costs, facilitate coordination with fewer interruptions, shorter supply chain, reduce risk, easier to detect areas of Mexico, the growing population, low labor cost, transport, and active facilitate the movement of goods, fast growth, and self-extinction for BD22. I get this regard high growth energy codes, generate resources, the force all climate, aging pandemics, attacks, inequality, food reduction, debt reduction, Western system would counteract globalization of populism, innovation, invigorating global commerce, co-op adversaries look skeptically on decoupling and confrontation, spiral, coping with supply chain integrity, trade wars, debt, populist regime megathreats today are worse than risking nuclear conflict reemerge. Otherwise, collapse causing nuclear war and extinction. Oppenheimer 21. These powers decline secular stagnation, increase liberal globalization, multipolarity, nationalism, politics, become polarization, collaboration, talks about economic weakness, finally alter institutions become battlegrounds for a world responsible war, re-entrenchment, economic disruption, interdependence, World War III, hotspots, Korea, SCS, Taiwan, multipolarity, escalation of conflict, preventive wars, weakening institutions that experience coordination, great powers, fight security dilemmas, CNC by UCS, minor risk, transfer decline, American capacity, increase conflict, US, China, Russia, renationalization, Japan, Korea, Germany, France, and Iran, ISIS, use of nukes, collapse of arms, control of arms trades, extinction outweighs is a categorically distinct ethical categories. Number 22, process is universally impinging on human beings, all complex life necessary to treat with scrutiny, the power to kills, as well think that there should not be hasty in concluding humanity wants a shooter that claims the future of whiteness, death of all living became a source of universality. Theories directly address the universality that have arisen alongside emancipation of the apocalypse. Extinction outweighs macaque. Skill 14, we have the reason to prevent extinction extremely high, 6 2 times 10 of 14 extinction is irreversible in time. Whether we'll have better evidence how to evaluate extinction we did research, we know for certain whether people problem now method scenario planning did power 21 scenario planning breaks assuming the future will look like the present death dearth of strategic nuclear policy dangerous to uncertainty methods develop foresight now prove decision alternative favors futures and shape and adapt to the one emerging future in gender knowledge humility where we live through reflective governance policy relevance is pedagogically valuable classrooms all their office environment bring 16 engaging policy better understand what we study do to work that's higher education college formula better research question experience absorb and theories has encourages intellectual pluralism policy makers worldviews become clearer guards against bias script smaller card root cause arguments of feudal and counterproductive just so the 15 starts for root cause and feudal counterproductive problems negate one idea explanation divisions effects a different society explains limitations of all any company any solution diversity illustrates difficulty of a monocausal explanation of real connection between the different conflicts skip the Goldstein card discussing the global effects of nuclear conflicts valuable coral 17 possibility of earth scattering nuclear desolation is vulnerability of humanity functions by embracing shared parallel become the opportunity to build new alliances and contest thinking adapted to the Cold War potential for global warming no example for there's necessity and thinking of how communities have common belief political national different past wars and attack on a country all people all using the parallel called upon shared identity we disagree it is nuclear bombs which is the problem cut from problem.
Border surveillance essential to the biopolitical effort to manage the bodies worthy and unworthy of life, preserving a powerful group at the expense of everyone else. Or racism inevitably results in ever-increasing tactics for sorting populations. The John 07. Surveillance organized criteria for inclusion and exclusion borders are the issues where surveillance gives substance working biopolitics slowly becomes linked to the process of sorting individualized system of massified aliens, biopolitics of borders, and management of waiting to live, management of bodies that do not matter, death fall into the base of insignificance, biopolitics of borders is also the management of life of those capable before we self-surveillance who demonstrate legitimacy through computer readable passports, racism, increased fragmentation with the biological continuum, so sorting will take place between those who are deemed superior and those who are perceived as inferior to preserve the well-being of the powerful population. Biopolitics of borders stands as the quintessential domain for sorting as precisely for this sorting and border security and surveillance or design security rests upon vast investments in information technologies, filter access, and minimize the infiltration of the unwanted discipline and control being merged together. The Aff Open Surveillance Project homogenizes diverse identities and experiences and those capable of normative social exception, annihilating the biological body in favor of a regime of data collection that raises the potential to exercise politics itself. Colorado 9. What is the difference with punishment to generalized surveillance of us all? Faith is placed in the anatomical body as a repository for correct information about the subject data has been privileged of the material body of prosthetic for thought of the biological substance. There's no distinct line in the body as information is dispersed throughout the information systems. Bodies can be fundamentally constituted in response to market pressure. Surveillance contributes to the reinforcement of norms by facilitating exposure for deviant surveillance has been in the engine. Theorists have placed their hope. Predictive models have been created with the goal of control of the future that they cannot take into effective consideration. Randomness of the body would thus be conformed or excluded from the system. Technologies for its subject's ability to control their own self-presentation even further out of their hands. The one sees fascination with nuclear wars, a biopolitical tactic designed to grant power only to those who possess the ball and are deemed worthy. Their apocalyptic narratives to prevent the extermination of racialized groups out of fear. Clark 19. Desire for the capacity to cause devastation resulted in attack whose sheer purpose is that nuclear weapons of role as biopolitical tools evident indicating exclusive sovereignty available to only those with power to enact that weapons can destroy life demonstrates the distinction between valuable and invaluable nuclear states produce apocalyptic narratives about proliferation, racializing the other lives for their extermination. The liberal securitization spurs endless war along racial lines in our desire to protect from the other. We subdivide humanity between those who deserve and health and those who threaten it, exterminating and fighting in every perceived threat. Middle 15. Modern politics offers extension of the war race. It was essential to the formation of liberal governance, peaceful liberal biopolitics, strives a series of species existence endangered when other consequences by politics make some war in which endanger species existence by politics not live and thus it preserves life from natural threat and seek command of death and security and describe peace with logos of war, peace and necropolitics security, which makes a permanent war against life promotion of species existence appears to be threatened. The very system subdivides the species which are more eligible and which are in need of extermination. Biopolitics and national necropolitical, a lot of which race functions sorting vice and liberal way of war. Vote negative to reject the affirmative biopolitics in favor of self-government. Vote collectively problematizing our position within societies of control through ethical practices of the self to imagine new futures. Only our method can simultaneously resist the state and its individualism, avoid pessimistic historical views of the world. Ruse 10. Self-government produce oneself as a autonomous subject and problematize one's position of enunciation. When we abide with pessimistic histories of the present, we fail and thought we buy in catastrophism and command the sense of unavoidability of the future. We forego acting upon our becoming through a diagnosis of the present, failing to question ourselves. We fail to see the emergence of these continuities that specify our present, preferring indignation that comes with control management and government. The genealogical is produce awareness of self-conscious subject. The problem is to liberate us from both of the state and the individualization linked to the state. We have to promote new subjectivity through refusal of individuality imposed on us for several centuries. The only thing we can impose a statement is managerial, individualizing, and identificatory ambitions to find one's own ethics to practice self to imagine the world otherwise. The role of the ballot to endorse the best form of ethical resistance. Only by questioning limits of power can we modify ourselves in the face of violence. Refusal to ethically examine powers inevitably leads us to reproduce oppressive structures, feeding up space. In debate is key. Bevere 99. Individuals typically use agency to regulate themselves in core social norms, promote normalizing effects of power, where there's just a uniform element pretending to liberate that gives urgency. What constitutes worthwhile agency? Ethical care provides suggestions to types of resistance we need to develop, and that's to negotiate relationship to restrictions we can develop resistance. Only we have the space. Ethics is a questioning activity. We use our agency to resist normalizing pressures when we question the limits of traditions and practices. Freedom is our inability to modify ourselves in the context of social influence, the same normalizing effects by exploring limits to authorize subjectivity. Our education is critical. Politics have been reduced to feedback loops of algorithmic regulation, which kills solvency and turns education claims. Only by reclaiming radical imagination through democratic debate can we form new futures that challenge biopolitical inertia. 15. Education relegated to algorithm regulation, in which everything is reduced to a desirable, measurable outcome. How would education reclaim imagination and culture drowning in empiricism, compassion, imagination, care, whether it's crucial that young people unite in radical imagination. Education would be at the heart of the politics to change consciousness. Only through recognition the initial steps can be taken to challenge powerful ideological and effective spaces. Political amnesia must be challenged. Young people need to think other in order to act. Cut the card there.
Okay. So what does the alt do besides rejecting the Aff, or what does rejecting the Aff do?
We say that rejecting the Aff results in the endorsement of our method of self-government. We would argue that what we are doing with self-government is engaging in a collective sense of thinking through our problems at the social level outside of relying on pushing our problems into the state for it to solve.
So how is this competitive with the Aff?
We'd say that given that the affirmative relies on securing a border, which is essential to protecting the body politic as a discrete social concept and idea, it would be impossible for us to both secure that border and engage in a self-government approach.
Okay, that's cool. You can have a question.
Okay. Let's talk about, let's begin on, okay, why haven't we seen war happen already when we're not during fast growth now?
We actually are. Our Oppenheimer evidence says that tensions are escalating in places like Korea, the South China Sea, which are like literal examples of war starting now.
Been doing that for decades. How long until we reach a war?
Our evidence is actually pretty recent on this question. It is from 2021 and it's been exacerbated by things like COVID, where growth has declined. Also, our economy has not been slowing for that long. And the escalation of hotspots also in places like Ukraine is proof that it is happening now.
Has the hotspot in Ukraine escalated over the course of 3 years of war?
It has gotten worse and is continued, and it will continue to get worse. And we've listed like 3 other hotspots.
Okay, you can have a question.
So let's talk, I guess, about your impact of the argument. Is there an impact worse than extinction that you have read, specifically about like claims about, I guess, like value to life?
like we would defend that value to life as a prerequisite to evaluating your existential impacts, which is something that really is hard to specify and create under a biopolitical system in the Homo saucer.
How can we
We'd
know
also probably say,
that we don't have value to life without being alive in the first place?
I'd say that that's a chicken and the egg situation. If we don't have value to life, then being alive is kind of a question that's hard to answer.
Okay, sure. You can have a question.
Okay. Sure. Let's talk about nuclear war. Why do people want to go to nuclear war?
They don't.
So
Or
why do they
like,
do it?
oh, they do it because they fear that their power is going away, but no one inherently wants to go to nuclear war. Specifically, that revisionist powers they feel like they're getting challenged by the US and they see an opportunity to take their power back.
By doing a nuclear war?
Yeah, by engaging in a war.
Okay. But they don't think it's going to go nuclear.
Like probably not, but it says it goes nuclear because of things like miscalculation, multiple hotspots,
Okay.
and
You can have a
sometimes
question. I have not been timing this, by the way.
Okay, sure. So I guess let's talk about your argument regarding the role of the ballot.
Yeah.
So why is prioritizing education, like your education specifically, key? If we won like offense that outweighs like on like magnitude, why shouldn't that come first?
We'd say that in the status quo, this kind of policy-making education that debate has been creating for the past 60 years or so is leading to just the repetition of the same policies we've always had. That's the Giroux evidence, which says that we're engaging in like algorithmic regulation of thought in order to produce the same things we've already produced. If you actually want to change the way that things are going right now, you have to engage in a shift to how we take our educational practice and debate.
Okay.
It's too off, then framework, then okay. First off, interpretation. The 1NC must specify the status of all advocacies in the 1NC during the 1NC. To clarify, you must explicitly state whether advocacies are conditional, unconditional, or dispositional in your 1NC violation. They don't. Standards 1 Stratsky if you wait till CX. To clarify, I lose the entirety of the NC, which is 4 minutes to prep answers. I don't know if I should go for case outweighs or read theory, key to fairness, since you know the AC is unconditional. I have the entire 4 minutes, which is with which to prep, so I need the entire to be able to prep during the NC. 2 key to education, so I'll have less time to think of quality arguments. Also key to inclusion in debate because newer debaters are less likely to ask about the status of an ARG in CX, so debaters are incentivized not to tell novices about the status of their CPs and then shift after encouraging a strategic error. Inclusion is an independent voter. You can't debate if you can't participate. Second off, interpretation. If a team differs from the conventional truth-touching model, they must explicitly specify in the form of a text in the constructive one how offense links to the role of balance. Should whether post-fiat offense or pre-fiat offense comes first. 2 what theoretical obligations do and do not link to the role of balance. Should whether the argument comes before theory. 3 how to weigh between advocacy, whether the role of balance solely determined by the flow or another method will defend truth testing. B violation. You don't specify. C standards. Strats. They make it impossible to formulate a strategy because I don't know what links to their evaluative mechanism. Strategy is key to formulating arguments and engaging in positions. If I go for a policy action, then you say the role of balance about speech checks. Then I lose any ability to engage in the framing in the back half. That link turns your role of ballot. Your impacts are premised on actually having a debate and engaging in issues of oppression. You can't use your role of ballot to exclude my shelf. I went offense on my interpret precludes on a methodological level. D voters fairness. First, 1 fairness is constitutive. For debate is game constitutive rules means any DA to our interpretation are inevitable and terminally non-unique. 2 self-defeating. All neg arguments assume that the judge will evaluate them fairly, which concedes its authority actively hack against them. Now framework. Interpretation. With the benefits of the affirmative versus the harms, all impacts need to be contextualized to desirability of the plan. 2 impacts. 1 fairness decks all topic prep pre-tournament strategy in moots. 1 AC offense outweighs. It's the only impact intrinsic to debate, which is why they emphasize strategic concessions and ask you to evaluate arguments on the flow instead of flipping a coin. 2 clash debate that is tied to a predictable stasis point. It allows for focused research and argument innovation. Debates with depth of contestation make us better scholars and advocates, which turns their impact. Prioritize debates potential to forge a technique of argumentative refinement because it's only unique benefit. Independently, if we lose it, the impacts must be tied to the plan. Still let us weigh the case for the reasons above. It's additive, not exclusive. That solves their framework offense, their reason to let them weigh the case, not reject us. And comparing benefits and harms is best for clash and argument refinement, which is a prerequisite. Fair and Fair 18. Inadequate framework rules include comparison and evaluation of different arguments, deliberation, contributed ethical degree by ensuring or considered and criticize people have moderate their impartialities, argumentation over what policy should be adopted, and not exclude other analysis. Rest but subsume them. Framework provides an effective way of evaluating discourse within a deliberative procedure for impartiality, filter out conclusions that will not pass questioning. Proposals tested in light of consequences. The perspective of consequentialist framework can accommodate ethical issues with a consequentialist perspective. Epistemology is secondary to the plan's harm reduction. Anything else causes endless debates at the cost of material improvements to the day-to-day. Jarvis 0. Epistemological debate facts of elitism displays contempt for those in daily struggle. What efforts stated the oppressed? How does it help solve war? How does it speak to those who comprise policy? To support that problem-solving theory is bad. It is a position that abrogates any hope of solving realities that millions confront. In what sense is the debate sort of a bit of epistemology be helpful other than foolish abstract debate? 1 perm double bind. Either the alt can overcome links to the aff, or else they cannot overcome links to the squad. The perm is possible. Democratic biopolitics aren't harmful. Dickinson 4. Nazism is not a part of ideas as a political structure. Biopolitics was shaped by totalitarian social management and democratic societies. Biopolitics has been constrained by rights. States did not pursue to murder neither political structures nor legal and political principles permitted such policies in a democratic political context. They did not develop Nazi policies. 2. Consequences are reps. Inevitably, Neg logic will rely on a series of statements that explain one another. Their links are effects of the resolution, no matter how they spin them, and should be weighed against our defense of it through impacts, which we can use to justify our reps. 3. No subjectivity shift. 1. All causes. Friends, family, religion, in the next 80 years outweigh 2. Blocks change, not people. If we lose, we'll internalize the decision as a technical error and update our blocks. Arguments are divorced from beliefs. 3. Switch side debate. It structurally solves. We negate what we said on the other side, which prevents us from forming attachments to certain arguments. 4. Debate. None of their evidence is specific to a competition precedes pedagogy and filters of subconscious. Proved by teams reading false arguments like climate change or China war good. Tab room and ending the round solves. Anything else forces doubling down, which is worse, psychologically violent, and allows racist debaters to win, which turns K now case. Where's no single cause and the link goes the other way. Goldstein 2. Please actually skip the Goldstein card. The all fails got him. 11. The questions of resistance raised by both philosopher and film so-called Armageddon and Esposito biopolitics have become too persuasive and question whether resistance is possible. Armageddon and Esposito claim resistance should take into industry and control politics and question the starting point in films. Resistance is simple and will always be possible. They do not show how difficult it is to resist biopolitics. These ultimately pacify audiences and function as a form of biopolitics themselves.
Okay. A few questions in Flex. If you're racist, should you lose?
We think that racism shouldn't be determined in like some sort of
cool.
debate setting.
K starting with framework. Then it's gonna be the offs and then the F. Framework role of the ballot is conceded, even if they have won a certain, like a specific interpretation. They have not textually told you what your ballot can do, which means you cannot vote there. Given that they have whined about fairness for the entire debate, you should textually just vote there. It's so clean. You're the only side that has done anything close to an ethical examination. But I will line by line their framework. The 1AC is an object of research, and the negative should question its epistemological foundations. 1AC Bever and Boris, which are conceded and give these forms of critique, are essential to resist replication of power of the real world, which infinitely outweighs fairness on scope and time frame. Our link evidence indicates that doing the app increases the deaths of migrants, and our impact evidence says that it would also allow for infinite forms of violence, which is also a reason to negate even if they win their framework. And they have conceded that their politics are incapable of motivating actual change because they regurgitate these same sets of discourses over and over per the Giroux evidence, which also takes out every single one of their points because they are unable to spill over and have their clash or fairness mean anything. Then the difference, then their fairness argument, there's a difference between fairness of evaluation and fairness of preparation. It is good to have people be unprepared before they go into rounds so they can focus on shaping their subjectivity within it, but it is not good for the judges to intervene, which is all that we have made as our argument. Skip the next card. The rest of the K. They say that epistemology is bad. There's no warrant why this is. Any argument in debate is a way of orienting yourself towards the world, which is epistemological, and they have not defined that we are specifically epistemological. They say benefits versus harm. This was answered on the framework page. They say perm double bind. 1, it is about weighing your assumptions versus the 1AC. Their arguments that assumptions are the same as implementation are obviously wrong. If you say racist things in the 1AC and also bad implementation, that is bad, and our argument says that their form of policymaking generally is bad. So even if they implement it, we should move away from that policymaking paradigm. And also the increase of total surveillance along the border kills so many people is so destructive per all of our link evidence that is unique to the border that it would overwhelm the ability of the perm to solve. They say no subjectivity shift. They say that there's alt causes, but debate does influence subjectivities, which is why people get interested in critical literature, etc. through debate. They say blocks shift. No, the rise of things like K debate and KVK debate have proven this is not the case. Even if blocks do shift, that is good because it proves that people are learning and finding better ways to defend their scholarship, which means that BK would lose, proving that those arguments are more correct. They say, anything else, Jackson?
Do you want to read Doniger?
No.
Okay.
They say switch side debate. It is still like under our model, you can have KVK debates, etc. They say our evidence is specific to debate. Yes, it is. Our argument is talking about education. Debate is a key educational space. They say all fails. Our argument is not Foucault. We have provided you a specific way in which you can do self-government, which is far better than any of their evidence is talking about. Go to the offs. Top shelf theories at length, they seek to dominate and control structure of debate, and in doing so form society's control and management of the bodies of debaters. This means the K is a prior question to theory. A, we need to understand our relationship to theory through the K before we can enact that relationship. Otherwise, we risk replicating mass structural harm per Giroux. 2, infinite theory, or B, infinite theory precludes real clash on the K because it lets them believe minor aspects of our method, never engaging the epistemic debate the K provokes. They independently means error neg. And C, they've translated their lack of understanding into blippy theory arguments, which prevents us from making any NC offense. And just don't drop us. You can evaluate it under their best weight interpretation, which solves everything. On the status argument, 1, we don't have an advocacy, which means there is no ability to have a status. 2, they can check in cross. Just Sumith is not a new debater, which takes out all their arguments. 3, they need to win that something like Kondo or Dispo is bad for their argument to have any bearing within the round because also this doesn't apply under either framework, so it doesn't matter. Same thing with the truth testing shell. Truth testing one, we meet our like rule of the ballot text is very explicit in how you need to weigh things under our argument. Fiat isn't real, so there's no way to understand things that happened before or after it. Two, they don't meet because they have not provided a specific reason why truth testing should be expected, and that also proves the link to the K, their case or the method stuff. On the scenario planning stuff, even if discussing politics is good, their vision of gamified debate led by collective hallucination of Fiat embeds hegemonic structures in the minds of debaters. Some of the critical methods can break from this inertia. Schleiner, 19. Active simulation carries symbolic weight referencing real problems. Toyness and nullify the critical impact of procedural logic of the simulation is fascinating. Absorption and rupture catapult to the player outside the sphere, causing critical reflection shift the immersion to a confrontation to break in smooth functionality, disclose the operational logic and totality. Cut the card there.
All right, let's talk about weighing the assumptions of the 1AC. So if your role under your role of ballot, if we prove that the AF is ethical, independent of biopower, can we win?
Probably no. I mean, that's not like that's a necessary but insufficient burden. Our role of the ballot says that you would need to like ethically examine the structures of power that exist within your 1AC.
Okay, so if we prove the 1AC is ethical, we don't win.
I mean, you could win if you do that, but you don't necessarily win.
Okay.
Cool. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Policy making debates happen all the time. Why does this one need to be one?
Well, it's a question of models. We think that if you turn debate into something where you don't have policy making, which is obviously what you're endorsing, we think that would be bad. In like the same way that like individual debates don't like create massive movements of change, but like they do have some sort of effect, like you talk about.
Okay, so debate does have some effect on communities.
Not necessarily effect in the sort of like I mean like in terms of models, not in terms of like we've contested subjectivity shift.
Wait. Okay, so if people got penalized for saying like racist or otherwise problematic stuff in debate rounds, then on net the model of debate would shift?
We don't think so.
Okay, I feel like you've contradicted yourself, but you can have a question.
All right, let's talk about I don't really have a question.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about sure. You read the critique sometimes. Why?
Why? I don't know.
Okay.
How am I spell? Like, I don't know.
Okay, cool. Is this round happening at a tournament?
Is this round happening at a tournament?
Yeah.
Like round happening now?
Yeah.
Come on, bro. Are we really doing that?
Okay,
Like,
can Tabroom do anything about it?
we should. Okay, this was not in your speech, and we should treat practice rounds like tournament rounds.
Whatever. You can open
it. Answers to fairness.
Difference between fairness of evaluation and fairness of preparation. It is good to enter at different levels of understanding, things like that, but it is bad to have judges intervene, which takes out the fairness paradox argument. Fairness.
How? Like, okay, how does that take out the fairness paradox? Because we didn't just say that the paradox exists if the judge were to hack against you. We said that if we're unprepared to deal with your arguments, then we can't test them.
That was the clash argument, which we gave different answers to. We said that it is sometimes good to come in, have your ideas tested, etc., because that causes us to think more critically in the moment about the assumptions you're making, which sets better norms like overall.
Okay, but that also just doesn't answer the argument. You just said, oh, like, yes, that is true, but also you can change your norms. I'm asking if there's a direct answer to the testing argument.
No, our argument is that if people go into rounds afraid that they're going to hit the critique, they're not going to say things that would link to it.
All right. It's gonna be the Aff, then Aff, the offs, then framework, the K. Everyone good? Advantage was conceded. They can see the trade is decreasing right now in the status quo for solves because border security streamlines the process in which we enable transport to happen faster, which our evidence empirically concluded it saved over billions of dollars in the past, which is key because it prevents slow growth, which prevents great powers from challenging our competitiveness and the status quo, whereas China and Russia, etc., are viewing us as weak and challenging us because they want to gain their power back, because they think that the U.S. is taking them over, which is they drop argument causes extinction. I should not have to do any more work here. Now the theory argument, they've dropped no RBS. They should not get any relevant offense off of here because it hurts baiting where people do not read theory in the first place, which means that if there's infinite abuse which outweighs any of their offense, they say they get links. We can agree they get links, but that will be done on the K page. The K. interpretation weigh the benefits of the affirmative versus the harms. All impacts need to be contextualized to the desirability of the plan. This is a debate about models not occurred within the round, and this interpretation explicitly excludes their K's impacts. I will do that here. First, fairness, it outweighs. Individual ballots cannot change the structure of the state. They signal whether a referee through the neg was a good idea. Only fairness is proximal to the ballot because it remedies our chance of victory. Arguments about what the ballot can do must be framed by what the ballot can control. Proximity always determines possibility, which is why all causes dumbest arguments the next 80 years, family, friends, etc. Means that it doesn't matter. If you live in a Catholic household, you're more likely to be Catholic, even if you're exposed to Muslim beliefs and debate. It's a proof that there are definitely all causes, but fairness is something that you can evaluate, that you can resolve. Secondly, they've conceded to competition. They follow time constraints. Strategic choices and presume you will evaluate their argument. Saying fairness is fine for speech tags, but not testing it is arbitrary. Like say principled basis with win utility. Nextly, it turns case competitive. This drive forces teams to think through the complexities of the state. Only testing explores false positives and negative. Whether the state is effective is indeterminable because it cannot be robustly tested. So you vote neg unprotected. It comes logically, even if they win their offense. The validity of the impact is determined by evaluating those impacts fairly. Even if you include that their offense outweighs, you've only assessed that debate. The prism of monopolizing the ballot access. The role of the ballot exclusion argument is a Hail Mary. They make our framework text explicitly answer this. It says all impacts must be tied to the desirability of the plan. Is the way the judge should interpret it, which means it should not matter. Now, clash turns the case. Every impact of violence of police institutions, indigenous litigation, climate change, etc., or delicate structures. We have the ability to think into detailed links. A debate is not good for one particular thing, but it's a problem-solving tool set. It can be applied to every issue we'll face for the rest of their life. They've indicted our research, not us. Our debate is a whole debating over a predictable state point. Both skills create positive change within every single structure that will end through their entire life, which vastly outweighs their offense. They've only said the only thing they'll say is makes us better racist, but they've not determined that we are racist in the first place, which means it's offense outweighs. Secondly, they conceded fiat is not fake. It is acting as good because it's good for fairness, clash, and consequences are tied to representation. So this means that our impacts should outweigh. Their answer is incoherent. Even if in a vacuum their model might be good, we are unprepared to deal with arguments that we can't engage whether we know it's true or not, which is the thing about the discourse stuff. Untested accusations are the worst of both worlds. Determining ethicality requires debatability, which clash underpins, and they've also dropped on the K. Drop no root cause. Do not let them make any new arguments regarding here. Extinction was untouchable. Do this here. Zimmer. It dropped. Extinction is a unique genocide of every single person on the planet, causing mass suffering everywhere. The only terminal impact running around the Castle evidence says, and forecloses the possibility of all future solvency, knowing the state is good or not. State is good or not because it causes extinction. It means that every single person dies. The only terminal impact solves. They also drop cells in the nuclear world, the real world, because it's dropping means that our impacts also spell outward. They've also dropped the perm and the net benefit. They've dropped the democracy past the impacts of biopolitics in the first place. The alternative cannot solve their individual issues per the ballot solves the arguments. But we want extinction is a good thing. And that proves our representations are good. It kills every single person on the planet. The only terminal impact. They've dropped no root cause, and they've not read extinction arguments. It turns their case.
It's going to go framing. A lot on framing. Continuing to discuss framing, and then probably the K and the F. On framing, the textual concession of the role of ballot is the most important thing in deciding how you vote in this round. The role of ballot is to endorse the most ethical resistance strategy. Only by renegotiating a relationship to powers, regulations to an ethical strategy can we adequately confront violence and move beyond dominant worldviews. That's my fear. The fact that they've textually conceded the role of the ballot outweighs everything else because it means a path for ethical resistance is key to answer oppressive structures, and you have to determine what your ballot does. They have given you a model of debate, but they have not given you any reason to understand what the effect of your ballot actually is, except through creating ethical resistance. And the only way to create ethical resistance, the only thing that's offered a strategy for ethical resistance is the negative. They've given you new answers as to why the model of debate excludes it. In summary, don't address those new answers. In fact, and on their fairness arguments, Oliver gives you a wonderful explanation of why their arguments about fairness are silly. They assume that fairness, the preparation for the debate, is the same thing as the fairness of the evaluation. As long as you're able to evaluate the debate fairly, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter these other fairness arguments they're talking about. Then the concession of Giraud is all important here. It is try or die. The Giraud evidence indicates all other approaches to scholarship are rendered bankrupt by biopolitics. Education is a unique space to form new conceptions of the world. That is first, terminal defense on the entire affirmative advantage. They cannot solve extinction if everything you do is always going to result in recreation of everything that's already happening per conceded Giraud, and also because they concede the gamification card that Oliver tells you, which is tell you that unless you're able to think critically and disrupt the existing epistemology, we are unable to engage in actual change to prevent the impacts that they are talking about, which is a clear reason why epistemology is key to your ballot. Oliver, anything I'm missing on framing?
Just
okay,
go.
I'm going to go to the K. Surveillance of the border is a tool used to determine which life is worthy of survival and which life is a threat to the health of perceived more valuable species. They've constructed a racialized other and allowed their wholesale slaughter by power forms root of modern domination and war. It allows killing without question in the names of the health of the dominant population, which is empirically magnified all violence, voting to reject their biopolitics and endorse self-government. We collectively question our position within society as regulation develop more effective resistance strategies to escape the mandates of the state and as individualism as try or die to move beyond the apocalyptic narratives of the present. They give you their pretty much their only answer to this is no subjectivity shift, and that extinction outweighs. First, on extinction outweighs, remember that the Giroux means that we are going to engage in repetitive policy action in the first place, which means the only way to access in the argument of extinction is to engage in a shift to epistemologies. But secondly, on no subjectivity shift, they ignore almost all of Oliver's nine-line, which tells you that the rise of the K debate is an increased occurrence is a clear reason why there is at least some level of subjectivity shift, which is the only offense you are able to get for shifting people's patterns of ethical resistance. Then when they say that competition prevents it, the fact that switch side debate would just mean that every debate becomes a KVK debate, which we would say probably good. Okay. On the affirmative, just evaluating affirmative is pretty simple. Giroux comes first, and it's a clear reason why you have to vote for the negative to have any chance of solving.
Okay, you explain Giroux as like meaning that we can never make change. Can you just like read lines that say that?
Yeah, I would love to.
I would love to as well.
Education is regulated to algorithmic regulation. Everything is reduced to desired measurable outcome. In a culture drowning in empiricism, compassion, imagination, care withers.
So how does that mean like the
political amnesia must be challenged for people to think otherwise or to act?
So how does that mean like the app
without
doesn't produce the benefits of
infrastructures in which they can be debated and acted? Our argument is that people will not be able to find new ways of viewing the world under your model, which means that we are not able to change any policies because we will
our argument is that the AF is the policy you need. I don't get how Giroux, like I say Giroux says I can't think of new policies. My question is why does that mean the AF isn't the policy that we say it is? Because the AF is done under a conventional policymaking lens, which saps political imagination. It means that we just reproduce the same structured violence we've seen in the past. Okay, what does that mean? Like, how would the AF not solve? Like, what does it mean for the AF to like reproduce things? Like, we've said what the AF will do. Like, what does it look like for the AF to just not do that? Well, I think like centuries of continued forms of violence and just people saying that X is the new frontier that we need to cover proves the claim in Giroux. It is that we will continue to reproduce the same systems that put us at odds with things like extinction, violence, etc., until we are able to come up with not new policies specifically, but come up with new ways of viewing the world. When we don't have access to imagination, we just create new policies that are worked under the same sort of like fundamental logics.
Okay, so when was
the Schleiner evidence is also very good on this question when it tells you that like your vision of gamified debate. I'll read direct quote: the toyness nullifies critical impact, which is another reason why engaging in this kind of repetitive policy making game is another reason that's just going to nullify any assessment of the real impacts of things. And if we're not assessing the real impacts of things, we're not going to actually solve any problem.
Wait, so when was this implicated as a turns case argument or defense to the AF anywhere before the speech in the round?
My rebuttal on the framing page.
Okay, sure.
We talked a lot about Giroux on the frame.
Also, it's an extension of the like 1AC offense that was implicated as that in the 1AC.
Yeah. Okay, sure. You can have a question.
Jackson, you have something?
Like here.
Okay, y'all can have another one.
Okay. So I guess what is the terminal impact of the K?
Extinction, violence.
Like Dylan terminalizes.
Dylan is so good.
Dylan terminalizes. You drop no root cause out of
what?
Constructive and rebuttal.
Yeah.
How do you get to extinction?
What?
How do you get to extinction?
Argument says that biopower is the structure that inflicted upon bodies causes things like extinction.
Okay, how? Like, what do you mean? Like, just causes extinction?
You have made an argument that says slow growth somehow causes extinction. We've made an argument that says biopower.
Okay, I'm asking.
So what are the reasons?
I'm giving you reasons how you get from slow growth to extinction. How do you go from biopower to extinction?
Okay, sure. I'm happy to re-explain the impact. Our argument says that when we sort of try to protect a specific body or a specific population, that causes us to inflict violence on people that are perceived as a threat or to the health of that population, which is why we see wars are intensely more violent now than they've ever been before.
Okay. Framework, then the AF, then the K. Interpretation where the benefits of the affirmative versus the harms. All impacts need to be contextualized to the desirability of the plan. This is a debate about models. The role of ballot exclusion argument is literally terrible. This is direct judge instruction. We're telling the judge how to vote, so it's obviously interactive. They've dropped all of the fairness testing argument. The only response in the last speech is this half-hearted stuff about like fairness of prep doesn't matter, but they've conceded all of Sumith's robust analysis explains why fairness of prep matters. The reason why you think that Giroux was correct is because we didn't have a carded indict to Giroux because we could not have expected them to do it. We did not have free round prep for their arguments. The only reason why you think that their argument is true is through the prism of monopolizing ballot ballot access, which was a conceded argument. They have also dropped independently that it terms case competitive drives force teams to think through the complexities of biopolitics. Only testing exposes false positives and negatives. Also, whether their alt is effective is indeterminable because it not be robustly tested. You should vote neg on presumption, and the only chance of having solvency is based on the competitive drives that would force teams to do things like, for example, read different Ks or have KVK debates, which means that fairness is a prerequisite to any offense on the alternative, which was just conceded. Next clash, they've dropped that only our model allows for robust clash on the Aff clash turns case. Every impact, the violence of political institutions, additional litigation, and their structure of biopolitics are delicate situations that require the ability to think through interlinked details. Even if it is true that they build empathy to use clash, they don't have our model can create the skills for students to be able to create the change that they talk about. Now the case they've trade is low now affirming solves because it streamlines the process of new tech, which empirically increases growth. That solves extinction because otherwise slow growth caused authoritarian actors to challenge us in places which cause nuclear war and extinction. Now the Giro stuff, it was literally a brand new argument in the last speech, and it's an incomplete argument. It doesn't answer the explicit links of the affirmative. At best, they can use it as an indict to our model of debate, but that doesn't matter because we've won that fairness outweighs, even if it is true that our model of debate saps political imagination. This is not an actual answer to our argument about why the Aff would solve our approximate impact of extinction, which is obviously an independent net benefit to the affirmative. This is just an incomplete argument. Saying that there will be recycles of the Aff is stupid, and we have given explicit reasons why the Aff would solve. Now, on their case, they've just dropped the perm. Democracy and rights pad the impact of biopolitics. You can do the Aff and the all, and it doesn't matter at all because it is in the context of the United States. It was like the last 5 seconds of Sumith's speech, but it was conceded.
I know everybody has conceded a lot, but their concessions matter so much more than ours. The concession of the role of the ballot is damning. The difference is this. They have provided a model of debate, but they have not provided a way to evaluate things under that model because you do not know what your ballot does. The role of the ballot is to endorse the most ethical resistance strategy. Only by renegotiating our relationship to power and its regulation through an ethical strategy can we adequately confront violence and move beyond dominant worldviews. That's the better evidence. I do not care if they have argued any larger framing claim insofar as we have won that there is a specific role that you need to use your ballot for. Then they have conceded the Giro evidence, which indicates that all other approaches to scholarship are rendered bankrupt by politics. Education is where we form new understandings of the world, and when you reproduce the same policy-making education, you are unable to create the imagination that moves beyond dominant worldviews. I will line by line their stuff here. They say fairness. No, they have conceded that fairness of evaluation and fairness of preparation are different. They say that we would want to, they didn't have a carded indictment to our argument. That is not a reason why it matters. Our argument says that you should be punished for having biopolitical tendencies, etc., which means that it is good to be unfair if you are problematic within the round, and the judge overall can make the determinations on these things, which solves back on all of those arguments. Also, they are only using fairness as a reason why or as an internal link to clash. There's no intrinsic reason that fairness matters to us insofar as we are not gaining anything from the debate. So I will answer the clash arguments here. They have conceded the toyification dissad, that when we view debate as a game in which we can role play as different actors, that causes us to nullify the critical impacts because we distance ourselves from it and view it as an enjoyable activity rather than something that personally affects different debaters, which prevents us from actually accomplishing any of their arguments, which is a reason to negate on presumption. And they've conceded that their form of clash is violent. It prevents us from adequately it just causes us to reproduce the same policy-making options. They say Dro wasn't implicated. It was in the 1AC, so you cannot evaluate it here. Surveillance at the border, now to the K. Surveillance at the borders are tools you determine which life is worthy of survival, which life is a threat to the perceived more valuable species. They've constructed the racialized other and allowed for infinite war because killing by this questioning in the name of health and dominant population. Vote neg to reject their biopolitics. In name of self-government, we collectively question our position within society and regulation to more effectively resistant strategies. They say perm double bind. 1, this does not function if they lose framework. 2, not under the role of the ballot. And 3, they've conceded the border is key.
So we're just gonna kind of explain how we viewed the round and
You go
then
first.
each of our decisions. I'm gonna go first. So I started on this framing claim, and the least interventionist place it feels like I can evaluate is this conceded role of the ballot. I do think it's a little semantical to be like, oh, textually they didn't say counter role of the ballot, but I don't really get a response to that. I mean, I'm getting this really strong benefits versus harm stuff, but it's just never contextualized to what my ballot is doing. Like, I feel like if you framed it more as counter role of the ballot of like, this is what I should do with my ballot, it would be like pretty easy, honestly, for me to find a way to affirm, but I don't get that. So the only role of the ballot that I have is the best form of ethical resistance, which means the only thing my ballot can do is the best form of ethical resistance. The Aff is never contextualized as a form of ethical resistance throughout the entire debate. Only the K is contextualized as a form of ethical resistance, so I can just vote there. But I look to responses to the K. The perm is really blippy for me. And the front line is also really blippy because I just get democracy pads and then I get no border is key. And there's not really enough of a warrant here from either team for me to feel comfortable making an evaluation there. And then I get this thing that's like, oh, switch side debate, like, and competitive incentives are like mean the K is useless because people will just like evaluate it through blocks. Like this debate starts getting kind of good in summary, but it kind of disappears in final. I get a one line from the Aff on this in final, and it's not responded to by the negative, but because it's not really implicated by the Aff is like a reason for me not to negate, or the reason that all of the critique offense is gone. Like I don't see a way that I can vote for the affirmative on that. And then also on the affirmative case, I mean, like the thing is, like, you have this like extinction outweighs, it's a categorical imperative thing that you say in constructive that just isn't brought up in the back half. Like I think if that was brought up in the back half, it would be really, really easy for me to affirm, because your warrants on the card are about like ethics, which means you can definitely frame it under their role of the ballot about ethical resistance. But that's never said for me. So I don't know how to evaluate this extinction impact. And either way, like your root cause frontline might be true, but the Giroux 15 evidence isn't about root cause. It's about like replication through policy paralysis and algorithmic inertia, which I feel like even if the Aff stops extinction this one time, because Giroux and toyification are conceded, like the policy would still, like extinction would still be reproduced insofar as we have a biopolitical system. So ultimately, the only way I see ethical resistance appearing in the round is through the negative. So I negate, but there's a lot of places where I was really, really close to putting Aff, and I feel like it's like one sentence on framing and then like one, like a better frontline to Giroux, and I could affirm.
All right. I vote neg. Firstly, because both Mac and Sumith said presume neg when they read their presumption warrants. That was a little silly, guys. Okay. Yeah, Aff basically reads this border efficiency stuff. I think it's fine. I also agree that if you guys had extended the spikes that you put in case, I would have voted for you straight out of summary, because it's a direct response. And I honestly think the methodology stuff was more of a time suck that probably could have been more efficiently used as a time suck instead of something that you were going to carry over. Yeah, I don't think this like maybe like the scenario planning stuff is good, helps us create new policy, but I think you're gonna get stuck in this like Giroux card about policy failure and how we need to like stop going through repetitive policy failure, and that like honestly I just think weighing extinction as something like that we solve ethically through the Aff is probably better. Um, Also, I'll move on to the offs really quickly. It didn't really matter to me. I get these voters. I don't like, first of all, I don't know where Sumith gets the idea that you guys extended RVIs, because it was not extended or read in rebuttal. I had to double check that. I didn't get it. Maybe I was flowing incorrectly, but it also wasn't on the doc, so there's like literally no way for me to check. Also, there's no drop the debater on either off, so even if I do buy the offs, there's no implication about what I do. And honestly, I do agree with Oliver and Jackson about like ballot directions kind of key, because I'm not trying to intervene like that. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, roll of the ballot's conceded, which means I automatically look to who's doing more ethical resistance, which means I buy that border surveillance is central to the biopolitical effort, and that anything that we do in relation to the affirmative is biopolitical inertia, and only us intervening through these like critiques of like our assumptions are the way for us to escape that kind of circular inertia. And then, okay, let's go to framework. To be honest, weighing the benefits of the affirmative versus the harms, I mean, like they didn't even have to go for the roll of the ballot for them to win. They could have just said, listen, the neg causes harms because of your assumptions. You should vote for them, like you should vote for us because we've critiqued them and why they're bad. I think like doing this, like weighing like benefits of the harms isn't actually that like strategic. And honestly, I would have just gone for like alt doesn't solve, K doesn't solve. Like you could have read framework and just gone for that instead. Honestly, like still a fine strategy. I think I would have gone for perms. Like, I'm a big fan of perms, and I think they're probably the most powerful. I honestly think Mac had like these perms been more explained in summary, I probably would have like looked at them more, and like had there been like a better response to roll of the ballot, I probably would have ended up voting off the perms, because you're low key right, and it's low key like kind of dropped by Oliver and Jackson. Um, like the blocks change and switch side debate, I think is pretty well responded to. I agree with the negation that like even like our like debates or like KVK debates on the rise, or like any change in people like being able to better respond to cases, probably proof that we're able to like switch people's perspectives. And even if not, then we're creating more blocks or better responses to help us derive to a better truth, which is exactly what Jiro is like kind of assuming. And you've conceded that debate is a key space for education. Um, I actually think you should have gone for the consequences are reps. Inevitably, neg logic will rely on a series of statements that explain one another, and like explain that a little bit more, because I think like that probably would have answered a lot. And I think you kind of get to that in the first cross when Sumith and Jackson go on this debate about like, oh, is extinction or like ethical life more important? Because that's like kind of like they've kind of just conceded this circular logic that biopolitics is like kind of relies on. So I would have gone for that. And then on the neg, like honestly, whatever. Like I've debated this, so I can't say I'm like not a little biased. I do understand it a little bit more. I'll also say though that Jiro is not implicated well enough onto the case sheet. It's like kind of like I kind of get it blippily more on the theory sheet, and it's not explained it well enough in summary, but explained enough and implicated enough that like when Oliver brings it up in final, I'm like, you know what, like whatever. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah. Any questions?
Anyone
Oh,
have
wait,
any-
on the weighing, everyone needs to do more weighing and everyone needs to extend better because like when I get to final, all I get is like, okay, carry the AF, carry the neg, neg wins ROTB, vote neg. Like that's basically like a summary of what it comes down to.